Greetings, I'm Sir Glory, and we're back in Workers and Resources around my little town, now known as Tshcheslavnyy, and it's just about survived. So we're a couple of years down the line. I think it was September 1983 when I left off at the end of Season 1, and population at that point was about 4,300, happiness was about 50%, government loyalty was about 20%, I think. Crime was our biggest problem. We had 75% unexamined cases. When we finished, it had been up as high as about 85%. Statute of limitations was, in terms of the number of cases that weren't actually prosecuted, was 25%, and we had just 40 prisoners in our prison. So, yes, things were not good. I decided to I had ignored crime basically since I set up the Republic, and then like 20 odd years pass. So that was the main reason for my struggles. People were just so unhappy because of the crime rate. So yeah, I decided I was going to focus on getting crime under control and see if that would save the Republic. So over the last couple of years, the population plummeted. It was down about 3,000 at one point. Happiness was down below 30%, and government loyalty was down about 12 to 15%. So I did focus in on crime, and I did some other things as well, essentially, I closed down all of my industry apart from coal production, so that we could heat our homes during the winter. Steel was down, all the construction industry was down, there was no construction happening for a while, and we did do some construction over here, but essentially I bought that in. Evacuated this village completely, and shut down our iron production. We did keep the meat production going, and our farms, and our food production, and our oil production, so that we could basically export bitumen and power to try and stop us collapsing entirely. But yeah, so focusing on crime. So with crime, I basically decided the best way to do it was to control the volume of cases that were coming in. So I got rid of all of the police cars except for one in both of these stations, and focused the resources, tried to get as many staff and police officers in as we could to get through the cases, and then weeding out the cases that looked like they weren't going to be investigated, they had a low chance of success. I just abandoned those and focused in on the successful cases. And then in terms of our court, same sort of thing, focused then staff to make sure that cases were processed. And again, cases that were getting close to the statute of limitations with no chance of being tried, just abandoned those. And also in a prison, again focusing in on making sure that we had as many warders as we could get, and boosting up as many of the mood boosts as we can. So it doesn't look good just now, but we'll come back and visit that maybe at some point. So yeah, really focusing on the crime to make sure that crimes that were investigated were tried and prisoners ended up in jail. And we also bumped up the sentences for the medium and serious crimes. Did seem to have an effect. What else did we do? Looked into the causes of unhappiness. And I mean, really looked into them at an individual level. So there were some buildings in here that had pretty low happiness. I mean, I think this one was particular. It's now at 76%. This was down dreadfully low. So get into individuals, finding out what were their demands, what was not being met. And in particular, I mean, food was quite often a problem, especially meat. So I had to do some tweaking of how we brought in our meat up to here, to make sure that we always had a decent supply, and it was being brought out to, particularly here, to that shopping centre. So make sure that they were fed, and then we had to do some more tweaks. Like I built another football playground in here because access to sport and culture was a problem. So again, over here we've got a new small cinema. So did all that sort of stuff to try and increase happiness, and also spent some money, which we'll get to, on the infrastructure. So completed the sewage and the water infrastructure down and around here. So did all that. I think power was, for the most part, was okay. And with all the industries being shut down, I was able to export 90% of my generated power as well. Yeah, so did all that, and as you can see, well, as I mentioned, it was costly. Let's have a look at what we don't talk about. The loans. So we are in the hole, but again, what country isn't? So it's just been a case of constantly cycling the loans, and the plan was to take out longer term loans to reduce the monthly repayment rate, but I'm going to start having to address that. Once we're back on our feet, we'll take out a lot shorter term loans and pay these longer ones off, but we need more money for that. But then if we look at this year, we've made 250,000 in profit looking at our exports against our imports. Did buy a few more vehicles, bringing in some more police cars. I haven't spent too much on manpower this year in construction. Did bring in some immigrants. So the loan interest essentially wipes out our profit this year. We look at last year, it was a completely different picture. We were paying for more than we were exporting. We had a lot of immigrant invitations to get the economy back up on its feet. So yeah, we were in a really bad position last year. So much better this time around. So we are on the road to recovery, I do believe. And we are exporting bitumen and power, but we're also exporting mechanical components again, and fuel when we run out of bitumen, and occasionally exporting crops. But if you look in here, we've got 175 tonnes of bitumen, so we're now producing just about enough to keep us with a steady flow of bitumen exports. What else? Yes, and I've set up low levels of steel production so that we're exporting occasional mechanical components. We're also producing steel for the first time in a long time that's been delivered over here, bringing this back up to capacity. So yeah, that's all going well. We'll eventually restart our construction industries. As I said, coal was a point where we were constantly having to import it, and essentially that was because worker productivity was so low. It was down low 30s, high 20% productivity. So even when we had like almost full number of workers in here, we still weren't generating enough coal to supply our heating plants and our power plant. And that was without the steelworks up and running. So things are much better now in terms of, if we look at productivity, so we've got 83%, 67, 84, there was a 50. So 70s and 80s for the most part productivity. Nobody, well, there's a 49, but there's nobody there down at 30% as we had before. So really good signs of recovery when you look at that. And we've even reopened up here, so we've got people, let me see, this building, I did bring in, did I bring in 20 or 15, I can't remember now, but I brought in some workers here. The only thing that was working up here during the last couple of years was the fire station to make sure that nothing burned down. So I was bussing up about 6 firefighters for that. Focused in again on crime, and we've got, for some reason, well, we look at the distance that the police cars will travel. and there's no way to reduce that I could find, at least. So yeah, these guys have taken on many more crimes than they're able to examine, and that's the reason why we now have 3 police cars down in these stations to try and make sure that they deal with crimes down here rather than folk coming down from this one. But yes, we opened that up, and obviously we had to start opening up all the infrastructure, so the clinic, the shop, cinema, kindergarten, and happiness isn't great, but it's on the way up for the most part. This one was suffering for some reason due to the lack of kindergarten spaces, although they were there. So it must just have been down to productivity or workers again. We've even got a handful of workers in our iron mine and a couple in the iron ore processing. So we do have a small flow of iron ore, or processed iron coming in here, but we're still reliant on imports for the most part. So there we go. Let's have a look in a bit more detail again at the crime to see where we are now. So remembering that we were up at 75% unexamined cases when we left off. Last year it was down to 33%. This year we've examined every single case that's come through. So massive improvement there. Court system. Last year we were down at 10% cases weren't tried through to completion, and that's down from 25%, and again this year it's absolutely nil. So everything's been investigated, or everything that's investigated is passed on to the court system, and everything that goes to the court system results in a prosecution and imprisonment. Not every crime is being investigated yet. There is the odd one I find occasionally. I'll come back to this as well, to the university. Actually, it's beginning to look like all crimes have been investigated. Excellent. Okay, so yes, it might be that we're on top of crime now. In fact, with 3 cars, we probably have investigated every crime that's been committed. Prison, we're now up from, what was it, about 40 odd prisoners. So up to more than 3 times that amount. 10 prisoners escaped this year, but it's up at 25 the year before. And again, that was down to worker productivity. The wardens, they weren't loyal enough, and they weren't paying enough attention, essentially. But the other thing here is that we now have 4 prison buses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, yes, 5. So that's an improvement. They're supplying our heating plants during the winter, but primarily iron and steel. So they're contributing to the workforce as well. So the crime, I think, is now perfectly almost perfectly under control. If we can just stop people escaping from the prison, and that's resulted in a lot more happiness. Let's have a look at, in fact, if we come up here, no, not there. Crime and justice, again, let's look at last year. So 773 reported crimes. This year, 662. 9% not, police didn't even turn up. 37% not investigated through to completion, and 6% the court didn't produce a verdict. This year, down at 0%. In terms of the types of crime, 404, 239, 130. So pretty much the same in minor crimes and round about the same in medium crimes, but serious crimes is reduced as well. So good signs again. And if we have a look at, let's come in and look at our city planning overlays. Go up to 3,000 metres. Food, we've got decent coverage, especially around this area. We've focused in on where our workers are, but there's nobody without food. And the same sort of story with meat, clothes and electronics. Obviously they're all supplied from the same sort of locations. Alcohol, and that's the other issue. Let's talk about alcohol addictions, now down at 7%. So that was up over 15% at one point. But so people aren't really looking for alcohol, mostly up here where we've got new immigrants in. Culture, again, it's pretty well covered now. Sport, the same, although up here they do have the indoor pool for during the winter. Church, nobody's got access to churches, but then religion sympathy is now down at 0. So I've got right on top of that, and everyone's well enough covered with hospitals just now. Universities, obviously, we've only got the technical university down here, but students are bussed over from this location. I don't think anyone would make it from here. They would have to bus down to here and then across, so I don't think they'll make it. But then electricity, everything's well covered. Heating, most things are covered, obviously not out here. But nobody, one reported crimes not patrolled. Nobody complains about lack of heat out here. They obviously generate enough heat in their internal processes. Water is good just about everywhere. Sewage, most places. And again, we don't have sewage being taken away from here. So a truck occasionally comes out and takes it across to the sewage processing. And I've noticed we don't have sewage being taken away from these new builds. I'd completely forgotten about that. So I might need to look at putting in a new sewage tank. You're not connected. I guess you're being emptied by trucks as well. Alright, so where do I have, or do I have an option? You're not built. I still need to get back to you. Well, that gives me an opportunity then. I could do something in here. If I put a switch in, then I can run another tank down from somewhere up there into that position. Or I could just run it down somewhere here. Yeah, okay, so that's a plan for the future, for season 2. Oh, I'm hitting all the wrong keys now. Right, so I think that's us covered just about everything. Obviously, there have been a few updates since I left off, updates to the game, and I did actually, touched on this earlier. So government loyalty is now, what did I say, 30%. Let's have a look at the actual stats. So we've got 30 odd % around there, down to 24% here, right next to the secret police, 32%, and we don't know some of the stats over here. Up here should be higher. People that are moving in here are meant to be 50% or higher, but it's obviously not working in some places. So yeah, government loyalty is something that I'm still struggling with. 2 years ago, our little radio station was bumping out the Soviet propaganda. It was about 3/4 of our effort went into that, but we can't do that now because of the updates in the game, so that's still a struggle for us. If we come down to the Technical University, look at the research, let's look at the tree. I can't do everything, I can't see it from here, but if I wasn't researching this, you'd see there's a whole load of new text to research. It used to be things like electrical components and chemicals and that sort of thing. There's now so much more to research, including broadcasting, and what we require in here is radio broadcast influence, and that can only be researched in the party headquarters. You can't research that with your academics. So that's something else that we're going to have to get on top of. And other things, you might notice that before, so look out, well here, field has low fertility. If you look in here, we've got mixed waste and hazardous waste, biological waste all being added in that need to be accounted for. Fertiliser needs to be brought in. Construction, metal scrap, aluminium scrap and plastic waste. So we've got all the new recyclables and waste management system, as well as fertility for the fields that are new to the game. And I did, when the updates were about to drop, I did think about whether I would just continue playing the previous version, but I decided no, I want to learn about them as well, so we're going to play them, or we're going to incorporate them when we pick up Season 2 and see whether I can get my Republic to grow despite the new introductions, or whether it will crash and burn again. So, I think that's me covered everything that's happened in the last couple of years. Still got plans to head out in that direction, to spread over our city into the island here, but we've still got some flats to put up here. I might put some more flats in across here. This town has grown a lot more than I'd anticipated or I'd planned for it to grow. And that's the other thing, I replaced the small heating plant with the normal heating plant here because we were really struggling with heating the number of homes that we had over here once we expanded out here in particular. So yes, so a few changes, but most of the infrastructure, the accommodation industries are all the same. I don't think I added in any more industries at all because I didn't want to do any sort of construction. So yes, there we go. Ready to begin Season 2, I believe. So yeah, you can look out for that. That will be here probably in maybe a week or so. But for now, I hope you enjoyed that recap of what's happened over the last 2 years. Please leave me a comment if you've got any ideas or suggestions. And I hope to see you again when we kick off Season 2. Cheers.